Mm-hmm. Let's see if we are really live. Hmm, can you see we're live? Oh, finally. Just want to know if we. Ah, great.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to Say It With Love, another episode into our education series for the month. Oh dear, ran out of focus. I'm your host, Eunice, and in today's episode of our education series, we're diving into yet another interesting subject that is so important for many working adults and parents out there, mastering the English language. Whether you're aiming for career advancement, helping your kids in school, or simply wanting to communicate better, today our guest can offer some incredible insights. He's a polyglot and an educator, trainer who's helped countless students master English effectively. Welcome, Frederick.
Thanks for having me, Eunice. By the way, I'm also a co-host, but I'm also a guest at the same time. I'm excited to share what I've learned over the years in this episode. Yeah.
All right, now before we move into the core strategies or tools, how you possibly master English, I'm curious about your own personal language journey. You're a polyglot, and whatever that means, I leave it to you to define it and lead you to become more fluent in multiple languages, not just English. And how did English actually factor into that?
Well, when you mentioned polyglot, the basic definition of what a polyglot is somebody who speaks more than two languages, or sometimes even more than three languages. In fact, either you're trilingual or you're, quadrilingual. But anyway, back to the question on uh, how my personal journey is like in the language learning quest. This is a great question because I didn't start off having English as my first language. And in fact, my mother tongue was Cantonese. That was the language of my late grandmother. We spoke Cantonese half the time when I was with her, and my grandfather as well when I was placed under their care. And English wasn't my first language, it wasn't even my second. I spoke Mandarin with my grandparents too, and they were the ones who tutored me and introduced me to Chinese culture and history. And that's the reason why I'm so into Chinese culture and history. Um, so I had no exposure to English up till the age of 7. Okay, that's a fun fact about me. I had to study English in Singapore's elementary school, and at that time, uh, I had to take up English as the main subject because it is a ticket at that time for any child to be successful in their future, in their life. So English is a very important subject for every Singaporean child. So getting a job, having better opportunities abroad, and even getting into a relationship, that's how important English is. So English helps in all these. Um, and at the time, it was becoming a language of finance, commerce, trade, and at the time, Singapore was quickly becoming a financial hub with lots of investors that's pouring into the city, and so in order to succeed and find a brighter prospect, and doing well in the English language became the duty of every Singaporean child. So the moment when you scored a C and below for English, you're not perceived as someone with good grasp of English. So I struggled in my first several years, um, learning English in school. I sort of resented learning languages like English and Mandarin because juggling these two languages is not easy at all. Definitely not easy. I don't know about you, but the reason why it's not easy is because English is theoretically a Germanic language. Mandarin belongs to the Sino language family. They're both very different in nature, two very different languages. Uh, they both do not understand each other. They do not have mutual, there's no mutual intelligibility there. And so I didn't do very well until my first real test came along. I think that was when I applied to a teaching position but was turned down. And back then, my language skills were still lacking, and I found it difficult to express myself eloquently in English. The rejection was a hard knock, hard slap to my face. And even during that time, um, during my time at the university, in fact, everyone seemed to be very eloquent and expressive except myself. And I realized that, I had to do something about it if I really want to succeed in this world. So my language learning journey began then. And it started with books, it started with music and people I would speak English to. And I started mimicking celebrities over Western media and started picking up their accents and speech patterns. I rehearsed many sentences that I came across to ensure I got the grammar right. I did this almost every single opportunity I had. And over time, I realized that, mastering English in general wasn't just memorizing the grammar and vocabulary. It was about the mindset. It's about developing this mindset and using effective methods that work for me. And when English became my first language, I dabbled with other languages and I found similar patterns along the way when it comes to languages. And I shall talk about this another time. Every language is different, yet similar in so many ways. You can say that I found my calling in the journey I'm embarking on right now. If I could transform my own relationship with English from a struggling student to someone who now speaks and uses language with confidence, then I'm positive that I could help others do the same. Yeah.
All right. I guess, in within the listeners or people that are in my community, many of them are working adults or parents, right? I mean,
Hmm.
the real life is everyone's busy. As soon as you step into the working world, you're busy. Now they have
Yeah.
responsibilities. They have so many things that they're juggling. And the thought of mastering a language at this stage, especially English, say if they are really looking forward for perhaps a breakthrough, whether in a career or a breakthrough in a personal life with English, using the language, so that they can get an, you know, you never know, expatriate job somewhere that requires that. Um, can be extremely overwhelming. So, what are the biggest challenge you see adults actually facing when it comes to learning the language?
I wanted to say motivation, but I don't think it's motivation because motivation comes when you found the purpose of why you're doing what you're doing, like learning a language. And you know, there are many factors that pulls a person towards a particular language that he or she wants to learn. But ultimately, as adults, we have unique challenges, and one of the biggest hurdle is time. And they often think, as in adults often think that they don't have enough time to devote themselves to learning a new language. Now, there is also the issue of confidence. Many adults fear making mistakes, and that's a sad fact, unfortunately so. And especially in professional settings, we are very afraid of making mistakes. Moreover, I think the methods they were taught in school may no longer work for them, and it is very, very true. And it's all about, at the end of the day, it's all about shifting mindset, shifting your perspectives, and using the kind of technique that align with your current life circumstances.
Mm, yeah, that's so true, especially the fear of making mistakes. I guess for me, I have throughout my journey, I think that's the thing that stood out. I make a fool of myself a lot of times, and I don't care really. I mean, I'll just laugh at my mistakes as I go along, and that really helped me a lot as a, I call myself a lifelong learner. So I know for a lot of people who feels that mistakes are not meant to be made, but I just want to drop a note here. We all are not perfect, and we are always on this learning journey, and it's okay to make mistakes because um, professionally, in fact, you may be surprised that people, in fact, get you know more connected to you because they find that, oh, you're just human, just like them, in a way. Anyway, I think most of our listeners
Yeah,
can definitely
absolutely.
relate to that, right? Now, the most exciting part is actually the practical part, right? Now, let's get into that. What are some of the most effective techniques or tools that you've seen working for your students when it comes to mastering English?
Well, good question. I always encourage students to surround themselves with the language in their daily life. Like, no point learning a language if you do not use it, if you do not immerse yourself in the language, if you do not live your life around the language. And it's all about focus on input and output. So, what are inputs and outputs? Inputs would be listening to podcasts, in this case, English podcasts, if you're learning English, reading English books, or even watching English films and movies in the language itself, which is English, right? And constant practice is essential as well, because without input, you will lose the grasp of the language over time. So input is very important. It has to be consistent.
Mhm.
And for output, it's about practicing your speaking. It's about producing. That's why it's called output, producing the language. And by practicing your speaking and conversing in English, in this case, you are practicing expressing yourself. And even if it's just a few sentences a day, it's okay, because you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be consistent, and constantly, consistently doing the speaking, the talking, and expressing your thoughts, everything in English.
Mm.
So, another key technique is to set realistic goals for yourself. And these are what we call the learning goals. So, what you do is that you learn one new phrase or one new word a day, for
Mhm.
example, and applying it in conversation.
Yeah.
So I like another technique called mimicking, and I use mimicking a lot in the past when I was learning languages, especially for English language. I mimic a lot, uh, and in mimicking, it's where you observe the native speaker,
Yes.
watch them how they speak their language.
Yeah.
Okay, watch the native speaker, how the language is spoken, in this case English, and then you mimic their pronunciation and basic sentences. Repeat them several times so that you can remember them, and then you use them whenever you can. So this is like you do the input and then you do the output, and you keep rehearsing and rehearsing, and you do this an hour a day. Like, in an hour, you learn a language, not just repeating the same old sentence, but of course you learn several other sentences and phrases so that you can be able to speak the language. Now the thing is that many learners make the mistake of just learning new words, right? The new words aren't going to get you anywhere, because without grammar, without stitching those words together to form a proper sentence, you're not going to be like a native speaker. You're not going to effectively learn a language that way. People do flashcards. Yes, flashcards are helpful, but that's only if you want to hone new words like vocabulary in your vocab bank. But just having that vocab bank, it doesn't work
Mm.
that way. You need to learn phrases. Phrases are important. So if you learn phrases and you memorize, or rather, you not say memorize, but you make sense of the phrases each time you rehearse them in your head, you'll be able to apply them in certain
Mm.
settings. And by understanding how certain phrases and sentences are used in certain contexts, you can use them as and when you like, and that's where you get a hang of speaking the language. And that's when you start learning bit by bit, what to say in certain contexts. And then, you just have to learn those basic phrases and sentences, and that's all you need to know for beginners. And then subsequently, the more you read, the more you get a hang of the language itself, you'll be able to progress. So you just have to start from basic first.
Mm.
Yeah. So the most important thing here is about investing your time and effort to studying a language. And that's the most important. There is no shortcut to that, unfortunately. I wish there is, but there's none.
Mm. I hear you saying that, previously you mentioned the word motivation, the goal, and then now the idea of making language part of a daily routine, which is breaking them down. It sounds definitely much less daunting when you break them down into small actionable steps, and that accumulates,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. Exactly. Totally agree. And I think one more thing I would like to state is that when you are learning a language, it's about communication, it's about being understood. So you don't have to have perfect grammar, you don't have to have a perfect sentence, when speaking. And sometimes you make a silly mistakes. Sometimes you know, you, you kind of make some mistakes in your grammatical cases, you know, as and when you're not aware, and just make some silly mistakes. It's okay. I mean, you want to be understood, and so long as the other person understands you, and or maybe is kind enough to correct you, you're on the right track and you're in good hands. In fact, you just have to be positive, stay positive and optimistic, and not be you know not be afraid of making mistakes. You just have to set that mindset.
Mm.
This mindset shift will create a huge difference in your language learning journey.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. That's actually how I came along from a non-English
Yeah.
speaking background myself, and
Mhm.
doing what you break them down the way that I don't know how to break them down. I just said I just learned. That's and
Oh,
somehow, yeah, you put them into really good structure, really good strategies, the way that you break them down into small little steps, that is so much easier to understand. Now let's move on to the part that many listeners are also parents here. So getting the adults and kids or children to learn perhaps need a bit of difference here. So how can parents listening today help their children all excel in English? Do you have any advice specifically for them?
well, yeah, definitely. I think one of the best ways that parents can help and support the learning of these young children is to foster the love of reading at a very young age. Because it's really funny that nobody reads nowadays, or very few people read nowadays. It does seem like that because kids with devices, and when kids enjoy reading, I just feel when kids enjoy reading, as in reading real books, and it can be digital books as well. And if they enjoy reading books, they naturally improve their vocabulary, the understanding of the language itself. Instead of falling into the trap of learning slangs such as the alpha slangs, and it. And of course, creating an English speaking environment at home is crucial. It's very, very important. And that has a lot to do with how a child is able to pick up that language and to hone that skill. It doesn't have to be formal, right? You can play English games sing songs in English or just have some casual English conversations. It's not so difficult to do, and the key is to make it enjoyable for kids so that they can associate the language with fun rather than pressure. So for kids, they are a lot of them are effective learners. They learn with association to the kind of emotions that they feel. And so when they feel that they are enjoying themselves, the chances are they will be able to remember what they learned. And that is the best part of, making language learning fun. And sometimes you may want to gamify the whole entire experience for them. Yeah, I think that would work as well.
I cannot disagree to that. I mean, this is my personal experience as well with my foreign students coming in, for the transition from being a all Chinese medium school, like back in China or
Mhm.
Japan or Russia or other countries, coming to Malaysia to international school to gain the experience in learning English as their main language. Yeah, it's so important. The first thing is to make them liking the class. So playing game is a great way. Of course, approach for boys and girls. I do find a way to go through them in a different social setting, but that's for another day. All right, let's.
Yeah.
What else do you think? What else do you think you can add on to this?
I think, yeah, I think the part on making the learning experience fun and engaging, I couldn't agree more to that. And the more likely, the more fun the language learning experience is, the more likely the children are going to pick up the language naturally. That's for sure. And the same thing applies to adults as well, if you are asked me, because if you're an effective learner like myself, you learn language through natural. I would say you will learn languages through emotional connections. So for example, if you have an amazing teacher who makes you feel heard when speaking the language you're learning and correcting you without the pressure of judgment, or that you have made, you know, or terrible mistakes. No, they don't do that. They correct you and tell you what's the right word to use. Or you have a wonderful experience in an environment or a community that speaks English. You're going to stay in that community, that's for sure, because you love it. When you love a community, a supportive community, in fact, who embrace you, who accepts you for who you are, chances are you're going to be with that community. So the longer you stay with a community, the more you're going to pick up certain traits. And if the community is an English speaking community, chances are you are going to improve your English language. And because you love it so much, it motivates you to master the language.
Mm.
So it's the same thing for any other skills that you want to learn. So you stay in a community, and if you find that the community warmly welcomes you, chances are you're going to do well in the kind of skill that you want to learn in that community. So I always stress that when you want to go for a language class, make sure that the class is supportive. Make sure that the teacher is good enough to create the atmosphere, the environment of support and concern and nurture in that particular classroom itself, because it's so important. Because when you love being in that classroom, when you love staying in that place, chances are you are going to learn a lot of things, not just English, not just any other language that you're learning. You're going to learn from each other. In fact, you're going to learn life lessons from each other. This is what I thought. And it's so wonderful having a community, and it's like the reason why I struggle. I realized the reason why I struggled with English earlier on in life is because I don't have, I didn't have that supportive environment that made me love the language.
Mm.
I didn't have the classroom experience. I don't have that classroom experience that the teacher is supportive enough to teach us English the right way instead of scolding us and judging us for making mistakes,
Mm.
things like that. I didn't have that. And because of that, it made me despise the language. And that's not what everyone wants. That's not what you want in your classroom. And as teachers, I think it's very important that you set the stage, you set the environment,
Mm.
and you make sure that you create a fun, nurturing, and supportive environment for your children and for your students to learn effectively.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the time when I started my university education, or rather, in fact, yeah, I started my education at British Council and then to the university thereafter. Things started to pick up gradually from there. I couldn't remember exactly when, but after going to British Council, things started picking up for me.
Mm.
And because they have it there in British Council, they have it there. Um, the environment, the support that every student receives from the teacher is it's good. It's a good support, and that's the reason. That's why it made me reflect on this particular experience. So it's very, very important. It's very important.
I'm sure.
I couldn't say
Yeah,
anymore.
I think that immersive learning environment is so so important
Yes,
because it is the thing that determine whether you want to go into the class in the first place or not.
exactly,
Actually,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, I know that some will start on passionate, right? And they'll be excited at the very first moment they step into the class. Yay, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm motivated. But somehow down the road he'll hit that moment, that plateau moment. And
hmm
um they're not improving anymore. And how do we actually help these students to stay motivated and overcome it?
this is very, very normal. In fact, every one of us have plateaus. Plateaus are totally normal. In fact, in language learning, when you reach a plateau, it's a sign that you are doing okay. Not well, not badly, but okay. It's normal, right? When you hit that wall, some say, or when you hit that plateau, especially when you arrived at the very stage which is called the intermediate level,
Mm.
right? I like to call it the intermediate level because the intermediate level is where you call it the B1, B2 level. That's the level when you know that it's a sign that you are very close to going to the advanced level, but you're not there yet. You're somewhere smack dab in the middle.
Mm.
Now, this is a sign close enough to a breakthrough, but most people just don't see that way.
Yeah.
Um, the thing here is don't give up just yet. Don't do that. Because I think when we hit a plateau, we finally found ourselves in a place of comfort, and that's not a very good sign because when you're in a situation or you're in a place of comfort, that's where you need to push yourself even more and self motivate yourself, right? Nobody's going to motivate you. You have to motivate yourself. And one technique I recommend is to switch things up. So you can do something like try new things, like try new resources, engage different contents, go find a language partner or a different language partner, however way you want. Um, all these motivation comes when you continually challenge yourself in new
Mm-hmm.
ways. So nobody can help you do that. Only you yourself can do that. And of course, when you do slightly better, when you learn new things, celebrate those small wins. Those are small milestones in your language learning journey. And I think that's really important. If you successfully used a new phrase in a conversation, hey, just give yourself a pat on the back and say, well done. You've managed to learn something new in this particular language itself. You got to keep track of your progress. what keeps you going, and that's what keeps the momentum going as well. Gotta keep your progress in check, because most people don't do that. If you don't keep track of progress, you're just going around aimlessly, and that's not going to add very much to your motivation.
I wouldn't say that's a fantastic tip, but I would rather say that a fantastic reminder for all of us, because we all know we are the hardest on ourselves, right? So it's so easy to get discouraged because sometimes our the little voice will kick in and tell us, you didn't do great this time. But actually, you did progress. Maybe the momentum is not that huge, but you did make small progresses. So those are really wins. And again, guys, Rome Rome is not built overnight. So uh, what more for anything that have to do with mastery, right? Now, I love the idea. I love this reminder. As always, I always remind my students, like, it's okay to take baby steps. It's okay to pace yourself. Of course, sometimes we get impatient with ourselves. And yep, every time we do that, please remember, this is the most key reminder you need to give to yourself, okay? Well, before we wrap up, Frederick, what would be your top three takeaways for anyone looking to master English or any other language in particular?
Well, first, make English a daily habit, even if it's just like 15 minutes a day. It's okay. When you start from 15 minutes, you have, you can add on 15 minutes later on and make it 30, and then later on 60 minutes, an
Mhm.
hour, and then an hour and a half. I think what's most important is to have the consistency. Second, do not be afraid to make mistakes. All right. Just remember that speaking a language, when you speak a language, when you learn a language, you just want to be understood. It's about communication, it's not perfection.
Yeah.
Okay. And thirdly, finally, enjoy the process of it. Language learning is a journey, and you sure want it to be fun and rewarding as well. So when learning is fun, progress comes so much more easily.
Mm. Absolutely. Yeah, and thank you so much. This has been such an insightful conversation and so relatable for all of us. So, for our listeners, to our audience out there, whether you're aiming to improve your English for personal or professional reasons, I hope today's episode have given you the tools, the inspiration to start or continue your journey if you're thinking like, it's been a tiring one. Any final words for our listeners, Frederick?
Well, well, now language learning is a marathon. It's never a sprint. Don't even take in any advice by any other gurus out there or self-proclaimed gurus out there that you can learn a language in 2 months or 3 months or even worse, 1 week. Don't ever buy that, because they're just after your money. There are many spammers and scammers like this. So, enjoy the journey. It takes years and a lot of hard work and a lot of time and effort in learning a language. It's never easy, but celebrate your progress along the way. That's the most important thing. Celebrate small wins. Give yourself a pat on the back when you go on to the next level in your journey. So all the best.
Thank you again. Now, and thank you for all of you that are tuned in today. So, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, and leave us a review on our podcast on Spotify. If you enjoyed this episode, we love to hear your thoughts and any questions you may have. Or you can even start a conversation with us. And if you want us to invite you as a guest to our show, let us know. Drop us a comment or email through fredandeunice@gmail.com down there. And of course, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow our individual TikToks at Learn English with Fred. here as well, and a new teacher's diary. Until next time, keep learning and keep loving your journey. This is Eunice signing off with Frederick.
And this is Frederick, yes, signing off as well from Say It With Love. Have a great week ahead.
See you next week.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.